Since they won't give me a gavel, I'll use my fist. You're in trouble now. Okay, I'd like to welcome you today to the Iowa 911 Council meeting in West Des Moines. It's 9 o'clock, and we will call the meeting to order. My name is Bob Seivert. I'm the chair of the 911 Council. I'm from Harlan, and I represent the Iowa Emergency Managers Association. At this time, I'd like the council members, starting with Sheriff Rotter, to introduce themselves and the organizations they represent.
Rob Rotter, Iowa County Sheriff, representing Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association.
James Chambers, CenturyLink, representing Large Telecom.
Lawrence Hartpence, I work at LASCOM. I represent Iowa Geographic Information Council.
Mike Bryant, representing the Iowa Professional Firefighters, retired fighter from Ames, home of the only major university football program that's actually exceeding expectations this year.
Rob Dennert, representing the Iowa EMS Association.
Gerard Myers, Assistant Director with the Department of Public Safety, representing Iowa Department of Public Safety.
Mark Murphy, Dubuque County, representing the Iowa Firefighters Association.
Tracy Bearden, I'm representing NENA.
Jack D'Angelo, Sully Telephone, representing small telcos.
Sandy Morris, alternate for the Iowa Peace Officers Association.
I know. Hello?
John Benson with Iowa Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management.
Jensen Connor, Iowa Homeland Security Emergency Management.
Phil Groner, Iowa Communications Network.
Randy Goddard, Iowa Communications Network.
Good morning. Welcome.
Rodney Tucker with the Iowa Utilities Board.
Diane Sievert, South Central Iowa.
Hi, welcome.
Doug Holland, Greene County.
Chris Sanders, Raycom Corporation.
Clint Slaubaugh, Raycom.
Alice Wisner with Legislative Services Agency.
Jim Lundstedt with DHS Office of Emergency Communications.
You should name this row something.
Tammy Rodriguez, Iowa Communications Network.
Mike Lauer, Iowa Communications Network.
Chris Myers, I'm the SWIC. Dan Pohl, Motorola Solutions.
Brian Midwell, Westcom.
Lori Hickok, Comtech.
Brent Long, Polk County.
Josh Humphrey, Iowa County Emergency Management.
Back to you up front.
Thank you. There may be individuals who have joined us by phone. If you would please take a moment and identify yourself.
Marilyn Stainer, Worth County 911.
Mike Casper, Lynn County Sheriff, Iowa Need. Doug McCaslin, Warren County 911. Stacey Gross, Geocom.
Ed Roach, Jasper County.
Are there others? Okay, we do have a quorum to conduct business. We'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Motion made by Mark Murphy. Second? Second by Rob Dennert. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. We have the minutes of September 14th have been submitted. We'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as submitted. Motion by Rob Dennert to approve. There's a second by Sandy. Little discussion for a change. The emergency management president who appointed a temporary individual last meeting is Dave Wilson and not Dave Anderson. If we can make that change. Those in favor of the minutes with that change, say aye. Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. Mr. Benson.
Blah, blah, blah. All right, so I've got a couple of things that Blake asked me to run through real quick. The first being the text to 911 project in terms of where we're at with respect to PSAPs turned up, counties that have it. For those of you that didn't catch it, the governor did, as part of a press conference on Monday morning, did make a quote formal announcement about it, and the governor, lieutenant governor, and the director of the department kind of outlined how it's working, the progress that's being made, what's still yet to be done, and some basic tenets about how you use text to 911. It seemed to be very well received. A lot of good questions out of the media that were in attendance. Also had a fair amount of questions that occurred actually after the press release was put out into the wild. And so that was good. The map you have in front of you indicates the progress as of today, and I stress today. It won't be accurate as of tomorrow. You've got about 85 counties that are accepting text. That equates to 95 answering points. That number will actually climb up to 98 tomorrow. So when I say the map is only good for today, the map is only good for today. We are still working with all the remaining counties that you see on there that do not have a color associated with them. Blake is still actively engaged with all of those counties, trying to complete that. Goal is still to have the entire state answering text by the end of the year. I do believe we will be able to make that. Based on the indications that Blake has given to me, I don't see that being a problem. So I believe that's where we're at. And like I said, that map will, of course, change tomorrow, so it's only accurate for today. So if you want an updated version, look on our website probably late tomorrow afternoon. And you'll find an updated version of that map. Is the next element Blake asked me to talk about was specifically the RFP process that we went through. I believe all of you are familiar with. We did have an RFP on the street to meet the requirements requested by the legislature in terms of, first off, combining the wireline network into the next generation 911 network, and then secondly, to create a shared service environment where you could move into a host remote environment for your 911 call processing equipment and other elements that go along with that. We have gone through that entire process, vetted the RFP, had vendors come in and make presentations, went through and made recommendations on who we thought should be issued the award. Department of Administrative Services did issue the notice of intent to award. We did go through the appeal period and are out of that now. And we're in contract negotiations with two vendors to complete both of those tasks. Just a little bit of background on that. We did receive a total of 11 RFPs or replies to the RFP. Of that, six of the companies that did reply did make bids upon the network component, and then 6, and it could be some of the same 6, did make bids on the shared service environment. Out of that, we did select 2 vendors that I mentioned. On the network side of it, we did select ICN, and we are in contract negotiations with them to do the network side. And ICN is actually here today. That will be something that we're going to do once we get the legislative authority. We'll implement very quickly. And I wanted to have ICN come down and kind of give a 5 to 10 minute about what it's going to look like so you guys have an understanding of what that looks like. On the other side, with the shared service equipment, the vendor that we did select was Zetron out of the 6 that did provide bids to that. The larger question then became the financing side of it, and we were kind of curious to see if what we thought would happen actually would happen. With regard to that, on the network side of it, taking a look at it on operating that on an annual basis, we will cut the cost approximately in half compared to what you're paying at the local level to your local phone companies. Instead of having that relationship with your phone company now, we propose that that relationship goes away and ICN and us absorb that relationship. It'll end up saving your local side of the business. When you compare it against what we're going to pay, it'll be about a $1.4 million difference. Once we get into discussion of the legal implications and what we want to do with the legislature this year, I think you'll understand where we're driving with that. The equipment side of it is a little more, it's a little more hard to pinpoint an exact dollar figure because that deals with, as all of you folks and you operate your PSAPs, you're all on a different kind of replacement schedule timeline. Some of you may have just installed new equipment, some of you may be at end of life, some of you may be somewhere in the middle. So it's not something we can say it's going to cost X dollars right now, and then we know what we're going to pay the next year after that. A lot of that would be incumbent upon decisions made by US PSAP operators in terms of when you want to, if you want to, and when you want to roll your answering point onto the host remote type of environment that we're going to create. We will, as we said, we will be entering into contract with Zetron on that, and once we have the legal authority in Code of Iowa to do that type of work, we will, of course, work towards setting up the host remote environments, and we will get that established right away. And then once we've got the hosts in place, then as answering points say, hey, we want to get involved with that, we want to participate in that, just becomes a matter of working with Zetron to make that happen at the PSAP level because the host environment will already be established. On that end of it, I think if we were to look at a 3 to 5 year type of time period, if every answering point in the state came over, we anticipate that we can save somewhere between $3 to $5 million to do it that way. That will be, of course, be incumbent upon the answering points wanting to do that. Our intent, as it has always been before, is that this wouldn't be a mandated switch. This would be an option for you folks to consider. And the larger question is, we know we can do the network. We can absorb those costs with the wireless surcharge and pay that, no problem there. The larger question is, can we do that with the shared service environment so as such that we could make that service available to the answering points at no cost? I think based upon the numbers, Blake and I are kind of in that 90 to 95% sure we can do it over the course of time. The caveat that goes with that is we're not touching the wire surcharge. That money will still flow straight into the local level. We're not touching the 60% pass-through on the wireless end either. We don't intend to change any of those things when we introduce a bill this year. We intend to leave those just as those are. So as I said, we will be working with the two vendors, ICN and Zetron, to get that into place as quickly as possible. But then we have to get some things done legislatively to make that work right. So the contracts will be sitting there, and once we have we get changes to the Code of Iowa that allow us to do that, then we would go ahead and move on those. And that will be part of the larger strategy. The other element Blake wanted me to talk to you about today is, let's talk Code of Iowa, because that's just really exciting. What I'm handing out to you now is and I use the word draft very loudly on this. This is a draft. This would not, it actually has extra pages in it. Just due to the fact that I've included a lot of language that has no change in it, but it's dealing with the relevant sections. And so as Blake has been working on this, I want to walk you through a couple of things and kind of let you understand what we're thinking. So as you start on the first page, that first page is essentially out of the definition sections of 34A. And in there, you'll see some strike-throughs, you'll see some additions, things of that nature. When it gets into the service plan, since we intend, the State Department intends to take over the wireline side of 911 business, at least the inbound portion of it into the answering point, the identification of the agency responsible for the management and supervision of the 911 system, that would no longer be needed inside of your plan. We would look at adding 911 call processing equipment, and the reason we did that is put that under a larger umbrella, so it's not just CP, but you're talking about CAD, mapping, recording, all of that type of stuff. Notice that we do eliminate network equipment. That refers to strictly the inbound network equipment for the call to get to the answering point. No longer would you need that in your plan. So if you have, you have call flow diagrams in there in terms of how it comes off of the central office switch and makes its way into the answering point, you would no longer need those. And then notice under F also, current equipment operated by affected local exchange service providers and central office equipment. That would we would no longer ask that to be included in your plan. Then pay particular attention to number 13, which is about 3/4 of the way down the paper. The Next Generation 911 Network is responsible for delivery of all 911 messages within Iowa. Quite clearly and succinctly says the Next Gen Network is going to handle it. We do need to add a definition of shared 911 call processing equipment because we intend to make that an eligible expense under the surcharge. The last one on their voice over internet protocol, this one is actually left over from last session, changing the and to an or for reasons that we can't quite figure out. It should have been an or when it came out of the legislature. It came out as an and between myself, the phone companies, and everybody else, nobody caught it until we actually got to the rule parts and said, hey, this is screwed up. So we're going to make that fix. We propose to make that fix as well. Now, please turn to the next page. This is 34A7. This is wireline surcharge funding. That whole section 7 deals with that. The one change, and please note, one change we do make in here is about 3/4 of the way down that page in paragraph 2, subparagraph A. You notice we strike the 911 Service Operating Authority and change that to Joint 911 Service Board. That's in terms of who receives the surcharge. We propose no other changes to that particular section. Thereby, we don't propose the funding flow on wireline surcharge change in any way, shape, or form. I know in the past there's been great discussion that the state, the big evil state, was going to come over and take wireline surcharge. Nope, don't want it. You guys still have it. So, I mean, when you look at the way this works out, just on the network side of it, with your wireline surcharge in the past, you guys had been spending about $2.4 million a year to do wireline. We're going to take that on. We're going to spend about $1 million. You guys will have $2.4 million less going out the door, but your revenue stays relatively the same with respect to wire. So then when we get into, we'll move on to 34A7A. This gets into what was the old days was the wireless surcharge, then it was changed to the emergency communication service surcharge. As we walk through it, as you probably remember, it says it will go through a list of how things will get paid, and that starts on the page immediately after that, in subparagraph 2, and then we get into the A, B, C's, and D's that track all the way through about how the money is actually supposed to flow out. A remains unchanged. That's the annual allocation that comes to the department to administer the program. B deals with wireless service, or deals with this PSAP 60%. The only thing we have changed in there is the requirement to file a written request. Blake is like, that's pretty antiquated, outdated. Everybody knows it's there. We don't need it anymore. But please notice that we do not change immediately underneath that strike. The 60% remains as it is, and the position in the order of payment remains as it is. So second in line for the answering points. C remains unchanged. That is the payment, the 10% that is set aside for payment to wireless carriers based upon their actual costs associated with delivering phase 1. D, you will see a change into D. D now deals with the wireline originating service providers, us reimbursing them for their costs to get from the providers network into the Next Generation 911 aggregation points. And you will see when the ICN talks where the aggregation points will be located in the state. That will become very clear to you. So then we move on from D, the first one, which deals with wireline. Then we also still have available the GIS grants. We do intend for those to still be available, but we also put language in there now that would allow us, that the program manager will indicate when those grants are available and that the application forms can be found on the department's website. E deals with the next generation, essentially getting the next generation 911 network, as well as the shared service environment. So you will see program manager shall reimburse next generation 911 service providers, shared 911 call processing equipment providers, 911 transport providers, third-party alley database providers, and those costs associated with maintaining and upgrading the next gen 911 network, the shared call processing equipment, all of those type of things. So that becomes the big lump where all of the next generation functionality happens under that line item. When we get into F, we did not propose to make any changes to F. That's our catastrophic reserve to make that happen. With G, this is the one part that Blake and I are still trying to figure out. We want to make sure we have the capital to do this. As you recall, 2 years ago, the amount that came out of the carryover was about, I believe it was 4.4. Does that sound right? And then last year it was increased to 7 million. Our intent is to either increase the limit or eliminate the limit. We just want to make sure that we've got the capital to do the upfront costs that we're going to have associated with the ICN, to do the capital costs there, to get the network in place, and then the capital costs to do the shared service environment. Blake is actually looking at that math very hard, and I do believe we will be in a position where we will eliminate the cap. So in the next year, you would see the cap come off. There would not be a limit. And essentially, we get into that end state that we're trying to drive toward, is that we don't have money in the carryover. We end up zeroing the carryover out each and every quarter that we process payments. We did not touch any of the consolidation language in there. That will require a little bit further discussion, I think. Blake and I, at one point here in the next month, will be reaching out to Representative Worthen and Senator Shelgren to kind of get their reads on if they want to keep that in place in terms of the grants being made available as they are now, or if they want to see that go away. As you note there, they talk about it running to June 30th of 2022, so my inclination is that they will probably keep it in place. So we have left that language just as it is. Once again, that language is only for technological consolidations, and then if you want the physical stuff, it has to be the combination of two PSAPs going together. I believe that's how it reads, doesn't it? That thing has changed so many times, I'm not even sure myself anymore.
No technology.
No technology? You're right, that's right. So it was just strictly for the physical combination of PSAPs. So that would, because now you see with us moving into the shared service environment, we're actually combining technology that way. The rest of it, as you will see through the 7A, does not change. And then as we get into 34A, 8.8 local exchange, there are just some minor changes in there with regard to next generation 911 service, because that's ultimately both wire and wireless would now be running on that network. And then the program manager, we updated that because in the past it had said selective router, but we're looking at approving access to the next generation 911 network. Bottom line is the goal is with proposed legislative changes, and once again, they are draft, is that they would, we don't touch the wireline surcharge, that money still flows the way it is. We make some minor changes into the wireless that allow us to do the combined networks, do the shared service environment, but we don't touch the PSAP pass-through amount, and then we essentially leave the carryover for the most part. We leave it in place. We don't put we think we'll get to the point where we don't propose the cap be in place. So we think, bottom line is everything that we're essentially doing at the state level, we don't experience the cost savings. You guys will, the ones that will experience the cost savings down at the local level. So we're gonna keep working on this. We have submitted this to the governor's office as part of a proposal for a bill this year. Those were due on the 6th. We obviously have not heard back from the governor's staff yet. They're due. Their drop dead date on that is November 1 to get back to us. But since this has been a multi-year effort, we do anticipate that they will allow this to go forward and we'll be able to complete that process. So, are there any questions before I jump off onto a next topic? Any questions with regard to anything that you've seen either with the RFP process or with the draft legislation that you have in front of you? Yes, Mike.
Two, on the emergency communication service surcharge, the 7 million figure that we talked about in G. Currently, it's zeroed out at the end of the fiscal year. Did I hear you
No,
incorrectly?
it is not. The cap doesn't allow us to zero it out at the end of the fiscal year. Right now, the cap says anything that's left out of the carryover, we can kick $7 million of that back down into the local level for all of those eligible costs underneath it. But that still, it intentionally creates a balance in the fund, and that balance in the fund right now is about $10.5 million, which is right where we projected it would be. And that the intent was to have the capital there, so when we do all of the network conversions and we create the host remote environment, we have the capital to do that. Once we get those capital costs out of the way and we get into the monthly recurring, then that's why we say that we don't need that cap to be there anymore, that limit, because then we've got the capital costs taken care of, and then we can just start, as we move into the new environment, we can essentially zero the account every quarter, so we don't have a carryover balance.
Now I'm more confused. So which part was getting divided divided by the number of PSAPs? Was it not this money?
If you're referring to, if you get into the 60% up front does have a number of PSAPs component, but that essentially is all answering points. If you're talking to the carryover in terms of how that grant gets dispersed, when you get into GA deals with the consolidation type of grants, or that subparagraph A under G deals with the consolidation. Then you got B, which is the 100,000 that goes to this council.
Right.
Then you get into C, where read that language on the next page. Program manager shall allocate an equal amount of monies to each public safety or answering point for costs related to receipt and disposition. That's probably the element you're thinking of.
Right.
Yeah, and we don't propose that changes either.
Okay. And the other one was if the cost that you're going to pay for, which part is that coming out of currently, or what pool of money is that? You said out of your funds?
It'll come out of the communication surcharge.
Surcharge, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on that? And I know if you have questions on it, that at least for this week, go ahead and give me a call, because Blake won't answer his phone. But after that, feel free to give Blake a call anytime if you have any questions with regard to that. I do have a couple, one more thing I want to talk about real quick, and then I'd asked ICN to come in here and give you a 5-minute, 10-minute, you can do it in 5 or 10, right? Okay. With regard to just kind of an umbrella view of what the wireline side of the network would look like. Actually, for me personally, going through the RFP process, I learned a lot about networks that I didn't know prior to this. And we had very, very capable vendors, but ICN will help you get a grasp of how this thing is going to work, and how it's going to impact your local phone companies, how it's going to impact the limited impact it will have to you in terms of your operations inside the PSAP, and how relatively simple it will be for us to administer it. The other thing the director asked me to talk to you about today was specifically dealing with, you're probably familiar with the See Something, Say Something campaign, which originated out of New York Port Authority after 9/11. The state is looking at trying to engage that and create more of a suspicious reporting function inside of the state. And the question is evolving in terms of how does the state, and I use the state as a very large umbrella to include all political subdivisions, how does the state handle suspicious reports when they get them from the public? What's the most efficient way to deal with those? You will see some states will say contact local law enforcement. Some states will actually say contact 911. Some states are actually using an app where if a person sees something and they have that app on their phone, they can actually type it into the app, it goes off with a certain amount of anonymity, and then it gets answered somewhere. Somebody takes it either via a text, an email, direct contact. We're starting to have those discussions with members of the law enforcement community about the best way to do that. One of the things, just for your awareness, one of the things that has popped up is saying, okay, where would be the most logical place to start it at the local level? The kind of default answer that's shown up has been the answering point, is to have those suspicious reports come into the answering point, and the answering point can work with law enforcement and kind of work it through there. And if it needs to climb up through the system, it climbs up through the system. Of course, my initial thought when I heard that, I was like, well, I wonder what kind of volume we're talking about here. Because you guys have known that for many years, PSAPs kind of tend to be the default, I'm gonna say dumping point for a lot of things. And that was kind of my initial question is, well, what are we thinking about volume? Do we have any grasp on volume? Well, the one thing we kind of took a look across the river over in Nebraska, and they're running the same type of concept where they do it statewide. They actually dump the requests into the answering points. And last year they had 150 total statewide. So my kind of fear was that, oh, good God, you've already got your telecommunicators buried, just doing the normal stuff. Now you're gonna sandwich something else in here. Well, it looks like, at least at the initial stages, the report volume is fairly low. So I just wanted to make you guys aware that answering point question is out there. Not certain that that's where the appropriate place for those type of reports to land, but the discussion is gonna start happening. So we're gonna take a look at, as a group, if we do get suspicious reports from a citizen, who sees something out of the ordinary, wants to report it, where's gonna be the appropriate place for that to land? It's part of a larger discussion. It kind of started between us and DPS, but now it's kind of starting to blossom out to try to figure out a way to get that done appropriately. I don't think there's necessarily a timeline that we're looking to get anything done, but to get the discussion started and see if we can, as a community, figure out a way that we might be able to leverage that kind of see something, say something concept to the benefit of not only law enforcement, but more directly to the benefit of the citizens. That was just kind of a heads up. He asked me to bring that forward just to make sure you folks were aware of that. And as the discussions around that continue, of course, obviously we will letting you folks know. Any quick questions, thoughts around that?
John?
Yes.
So basically, the way I'm reading this is, and to go back to Mike's question, is that money that was supposed to be divided up, the way it reads in the code is that the director can decide that money, that $7 million that was supposed to be set up to be split, you guys are now saying that that's gonna be used for your projects, is basically how I'm reading it?
No.
It said at the end of, so,
right.
Letter G.
Yep.
Says if the monies aren't spent by the end of 2018, the money can be expended as following, and so then basically gives the director authority to delegate that out. And if there's projects, then he can pick those projects to use that money for.
I don't read it that way.
Okay.
Because if you go under G, if you look at A deals strictly with the consolidation question. So that's not anything. That's out. If you get into B gets into the money, the $100,000 that goes to the council for your education, training, those type of things. When you get into C, program manager shall allocate an equal amount of monies to the public safety answering points for costs related to receipt and disposition of 911 calls, including hardware and software for next generation 911 network, and local costs related to accessing the state's interoperable communication systems.
Right, so C is where you're saying that remaining money is, or is that stuff is correct?
That's not, the way I've interpreted that and the way Blake interprets that, and I believe the way the director interprets that, C is strictly PSAP money.
Okay.
That's not us. We will live in, truthfully, we live up in paragraphs. Okay, B is the 60%. C is to the wireless carriers. We will live essentially in D and E.
Okay.
That's where we intend to make all of the payments out of to do all of the network and the functionalities and all of those type of things. Does that help you?
Yeah.
Make sense?
So that's where I think that was answering Mike's question.
Okay.
Yeah, because
you got to ask a better question then.
Yeah, I know. I probably said it wrong. But so you were talking about changing that 7 million number, possibly?
Yeah. One way or another, that number's going to change. It's either going away or it's going up.
Right. That's. I heard that part. I thought I heard you say, and maybe I was incorrect, was that it would be zeroed out quarterly.
We have to take a look at that and understand. I think over the course of the year, in the entirety of the year, it would be zeroed out. There would be no balance as you cross the fiscal year. If we would do that on a quarterly basis or not, I think some of that, you could get into some accounting issues just due to the fact that you might have projects that are happening at the local level, like a consolidation project. that would require us to carry a balance of cost a quarter to meet that that encumbered expense that we would have.
Yeah, that was kind of more of my question, is not that 7 million or whether it was going to be there, be eliminated or raised, but I thought I heard you say something about being balanced out quarterly as opposed to currently it's balanced, or it's zeroed out.
Right.
It's a better term, annually. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I ask, is Randy or Phil or Mike's going to do it? Yeah, just.
John, just a quick question. Many of us use local database.
Mhm.
How will that be impacted?
We have Lori, yeah, there won't be an impact to that. That was part of essentially we knew that we have centralized alley databases, and then we still have, as Bob Seibert said it, you'll get my alley out of my cold dead hands, but Bob's retiring pretty soon, but that's not quite cold dead, but that's still pretty close. No, the intention is to leave that functionality as intact as possible, so it remains, you guys are comfortable with working with that side of the alley of it. Some people, they don't care where their alley sits, just as long as the numbers are in there and they pop up on the screen. Other places are more actively engaged in the management of their alley.
So then the per record cost would be borne by the state as well?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
John, last question for you.
Yeah.
Did the ICN, and they're gonna talk, I know, but did they address the fact that some places in Iowa, their hubs are not in places with generator backup? Like in Iowa County, for instance, we've tried to move it from the school to our PSAP, and we've been told, no, that can't happen. So I just wondered if that was gonna be addressed, if we're gonna be using them for all these other services additional to what we are currently using them for.
Well, the one thing, and I'll let them kind of get into the nuts and bolts on this deal. The one thing that will become readily apparent as you listen to them, the network that's going to support the transport of the wireline call into the next generation element is going to be a separate animal. So there are requirements that we've placed upon them in terms of resiliency that they have to meet to be able to do that. And in their reply to the RFP, they did meet those. But that was one of the issues we kind of had rolling around in our head, is this stuff made it up with other business and traffic that the ICN is moving around the state? The answer to that question is no, it's not. It will essentially be its own standalone animal. Anything else before I turn it over to the folks from the ICN? All right, gentlemen.
Is able to get monitors up there, able to see a PowerPoint presentation? Yeah. Okay. That was my background. All right. I don't have to keep like exact notes on there, but I'm showing primary monitoring. Yeah. There we go, perfect. All right, good morning. Thank you guys for letting us talk here. I will make this real quick, and great question on that specifically on the points. As you guys well know, ICN does operate the PSAP aggregation network that we work with TCS on. This is a completely separate animal. What was proposed was a network that actually is built separate from the ground up. Different fiber optic wavelengths, different network gear equipment, even different aggregation points towards this. What you're seeing here on this screen, you can see is one of the RFP requirements is that there would be LATA aggregation points. They wanted to bring all CAMA, legacy, SIP, whatever delivery points from local telecom carriers from the PSAPs or from individuals calling into PSAPs, how those calls get to ultimately selective routers that Comtech TCS will be operating. They wanted to have them regionally aggregated. And as you can see here, what ICN has laid out here, this is kind of a logical view, gives you a little bit of idea. I'm not going to show the fiber route map, but know that it is truly redundant towards that. And we are even within the costs of the RFP have built in towards those costs to even put separate building entrances in. We already have N+1 power redundancy at all of these sites. There's already basically a minimum of 2 of everything will be sitting there: local network gateways, power sources, generator backup, commercial power, and then also fiber paths as well as transport gear towards that. As you can see, I put on there exactly where the spots are going to be located at for who needs to meet up to us. We actually have NPOP cables located for every LEC at these locations. When we installed these sites 20 plus years ago, more than that now, probably 30 years ago, there was large NPOP cables that are sitting there for people to meet up with us at. And we'll of course work with whomever we have to get new things established. But right now, in LATA 630, Sheldon, Northwest Iowa Community College, that is one of our redundant sites. Down below there, Council Bluffs, I believe that is LATA 644, yeah. That is Iowa Western Community College. Of course, JFHQ is one of our main network hubs. Cedar Rapids, Kirkwood, and then Southeast Iowa Community College in Burlington. Those will be the points where that the CAMA trunks, incoming local traffic from local telco providers will aggregate into the network. What this is going to end up looking like, real quick, since I don't want to behoove a lot of major points here. You're not going to let me change, huh? Here we go. Current slide. Give me a second here. I wouldn't believe this would want to happen right now. There. This is the end result of what ICN proposes from just an overall network standpoint of things. As you can see, we have everything drawn out there. You got to love all the lines, but the point being made is there are connections going to each ladder from everything you can kind of see on the far left is what would be local tandem switches dropping off either, like I said, either going to be SIP or legacy CAMA multi-frequency to these aggregation points for ladders where we will have multiple LNGs and then also just transport that would go across to ultimately hand off to the 2 CallLogic data centers, being West Des Moines and Davenport. From there specifically, it's a pretty cut and dry. ICN will be using MPLS technology across our network. And as we said beforehand, this is a separate network towards that, so it will not ride ICN's production network at all. This MPLS network will only be utilized for this specific project alone: Homeland Security, wireline, wireless transport for the network. One thing to kind of mention about this, to get into some technical specs, everything will be 10 gig across the ring. It will be with MPLS. It has fast reroute. It has a couple of other technical words, which I will go ahead and with traffic engineering and just forego for the time being. One of the things that we did build into this, I think looking at the overall call counts of this network should be able to handle somewhere around 114,000 calls simultaneously. So as long as we're not inundated with 114,000 calls, and that's using G711 as a codec, just for the bandwidth going forward from there, I think we will be fine. We have overbuilt this so that it will last as it needs to be. Fiber-wise, as I said, multiple paths coming out of each location. If it gets cut, things will reroute. Less than 50 milliseconds is what the engineering spec is on that. Ultimately, when we go ahead and we design the links towards this, because we're not talking about having a million different paths. We're talking about we have known fiber paths, known distances. We'll get that down to sub 50 milliseconds, hopefully to where it's not even noticeable in a call. In a nutshell, that is transport-wise what we're going to be offering. Project timeline, let's see if I can show you real quick. Two things, actually let's do this here. We're currently for legacy network gateways, because that's one of our main concerns. Currently, we're working with 3 vendors right now. Metaswitch, Cisco, and Sonos right now. For Metaswitch, we are looking at the MG6000 series, if you guys care about that. We're looking at the 4000 series of routers with Cisco, and Sonos, we are currently working with the SGX4000. All multiple vendor, multi-platform devices that will take in any legacy network gateway towards this. So kind of gives you who we're looking at for the network side of things. Ultimately, the end result is we want to make sure calls get delivered in the best possible way. In project timelines, what we are looking at is per the RFP and what we have committed, and hopefully what we can get when it comes to just working with the multiple parties in this. We're looking at a year time frame. We want if we get the go ahead from June or July fiscal year starting 2018, we'll start running, and hopefully by that time frame, like I said, things will come up, we know that, but our whole purpose is, this kind of gives you a rough layout what we're talking about doing. Whole purpose is get everything installed, tested, implemented, pre-tested, and then start doing migration traffic by June 2019. So we're looking at a year for implementation, and after that, it will go ahead and run and be running smooth in our perspective of things. So that is our final goal, and that's what we will deliver. Kind of a last point that I like to throw in here is this is one of the standards that was with the RFP was we were to meet at least NENA I3 standards, and of the 11 or so marks that are on there that kind of lay out the overall general standards, 5 of them that I see deal with network. This is not all inclusive, but the ones that deal with network, these are our initiatives. These are what we will offer and what we will deliver for all stakeholders of 911. But the calls are going to be SIP-based when entering the EZUNet. The network will pass all needed info for location-based services. The network will support legacy network gateways as long as needed. It's not going away. We understand that. Network will be flexible to change based on any laws, federal, state, local, and the network will continue to support all North American protocols. And one's kind of a joke because I hope we always have North American protocols and we don't go down the European route of things, because that would be a big change, a big headache for everybody. But other than that, I will keep it that short and not go any further. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you all for your time, and go Iowa State. All mics like Iowa State.
Thank you. John, the 911 program financial reports.
Blake did not ask me to bring one because there hasn't been any change since the one he presented last week.
Okay, thank you. Very good presentation. I would remind the council members that the responsibility of the council is to provide advice to the program manager. And as you take these legislative issues back to your individual associations, as a council, we have a responsibility to advise Homeland Security and the program manager on any changes we might think would be appropriate. So to that end, I would encourage you to do that and bring those changes back as early as possible.
To that end, Bob, just to follow on to that, if any of your associations would like to have a one-on-one with Blake or even myself, just let us know. We'd be more than happy to come out if you guys have meetings. But I know that
the Sheriffs and Deputies Association has already reached out to us, so I know, Sean, I'm irritating you. If anybody else, any of your other associations or even your local service boards, even if a conference call would help you guys understand what's going on, we're more than happy to do that.
ICN also will back that commitment as well to help out if anybody has any questions. We will be there with Homeland Security to answer any questions on the network, the merger connectivity, so on and so forth.
Excellent. Next item on the agenda is the wireless carryover funds grant applications. None?
I wasn't given any. Sorry, doesn't trust me with the money. I don't know.
Yeah.
Help me out here.
Washington, Worth, and South Central Iowa.
Okay, I believe Washington, Worth, and South Central Iowa have submitted grant applications. And the council members did receive those. At this point, I would entertain a motion that we approve those.
So moved.
Okay, motion made and second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. Technical Advisory Committee. Items of interest from our telephone providers, GIS. Chris?
I'm assuming this is when I go right. I don't have an agenda in front of me. I'll keep this brief from the SWIC. We had a lot of coordination with Department of Homeland Security and Office of Emergency Communications to produce the SCIP. I'm happy to report that that's in front of the board members now, and it's highly likely they're going to take some action on it today. It's up to them in the end, but everything seems to be in good working order. So as a SWIC, I can feel some of that oxygen coming back into the room now that it's not taking up everything. I do want to thank every council member's participation in drafting that SCIP. It's a pretty heavy lift, and it looks like we have a good working product. And anybody else in the audience too that participated, thank you very much for your time. Had a whole bunch of meetings with counties for outreach and got a list of their concerns as stakeholders, so we're taking that back to the board for policy roll-ups. And the encryption subcommittee also continues to meet to look at encryption as an option, just another tool in the toolbox for ISIX. We're working through the issues associated with that, and I think we're making some excellent progress. We are also looking for participation from the RICS and ways to facilitate that. We've been giving them some projects now and haven't had a whole lot of feedback from them on these projects yet, but I think that they will enjoy the work that'll be put into it because it is meaningful work. So again, if you know anybody that wants to participate with the ISIX project, please send them to me. I'm happy to take on any volunteer. And otherwise, I'll keep this as brief as possible. Do you have any questions for me? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lundstedt?
Good morning. Just a couple of quick things for you. As October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, would remind you the principal things we should all be thinking about as individuals is the simple tenet of stop, think, connect. Take that back to your PSAPs, to your operators, to think about what they are clicking on or what they're looking at if they're in a public internet connection environment in your center. Hopefully it's isolated. We've learned some interesting lessons about that. But most malware and most of the negative impacts that we see on businesses and government agencies is malware that's associated, either shared through an email or through a social media app. Second thing I'd offer you, just for those of you who are thinking about shared service environments, I attended a technical working group meeting in an adjacent state this week where we talked about the largest PSAP in the state just joined a shared service environment for a hosted 911 delivery for both wireline and wireless. That particular PSAP has 24 answering positions and represents already well over a third of the call volume on that state's shared services network. However, with the redundancy and balance that was built into the design, they observed a loading change with 70 PSAPs and adding this additional resource of less than 1.5% additional loading on their servers. So it is possible to manage, and they have some very good tips that I'll be happy to share with either Blake or John or the ICN on some redundancy strategies that involve things like failover to wireless LTE. Think about how FirstNet might be a redundancy resource in the event of backhaul fade or other kinds of service interruptions. So there's a lot of lessons being learned, and my goal here is to try to share some of those things as we identify them, but I would not be afraid of a shared hosted network based on what I heard just this week about how to manage it. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Legislative issues?
Just a couple things. One, I was recently made aware that there'll be effort to include the dispatchers in the IPERS protected class. Something to look at coming forward. I also serve on the State Fire Service Emergency Response Council. We are looking at a funding source to funding for Fire Service Training Bureau hasn't changed for about 20 years, or even maybe even longer than that, but we'll be looking at potential areas for funding for firefighter training. And they have offered the Training Bureau Accreditations Manager position to an individual, and they're working on a background check, and I think fairly soon they're going to open up for a bureau chief for the Training Bureau.
Okay, thank you. There are items for discussion from the board members.
I was going to check and see if anybody else received this crazy email that I got, probably related to what Jim was just talking about. I need a second just to find it back, but I got some. Where did it go? Hang on a second. Just had it. I lost it. Does anybody know a Ginger Thompson? So I got some crazy thing about. Oh, so that is a legitimate one? No, it's not. Yeah, well, yeah, and okay, yeah. Yeah, it's a stupid me, but yeah, it says to the Homeland Security 911 Council list, and then it was like, we've received major payment of whatever, $3,694.55 and blah, blah, blah. So they can take everything I got because they're going to be in the hole when they get done. So fine by me. Please hack me.
Yeah, I've got probably 4 or 5 of those.
Okay, seems to be a plethora of the phishing emails going out. Chase is wanting all your money, and so just be careful what you open. Make sure you have your virus protection up to date, and you have a good IT service provider that can help you clean it up when you do try to click on something that looks legitimate. Unfinished business? Don't believe there is any at this point. Any travel requests? Business from the floor, 911 issues at the PSAP. Very quiet group today. I'd like to thank Kara Sorrells for taking the minutes for the meeting today. She is taking the place of Sally Hall. And I think Sheriff Rotter can give us a little bit of an update, please.
So, for those who probably don't know, on September 29th, Sally was having some pretty acute medical issues and was encouraged to go to the hospital in Iowa City. And later that night, she was diagnosed with a fairly large brain tumor. So that following Tuesday, they performed what turned out to be a very successful surgery, removing probably about 95 to 98% of the tumor. Unfortunately, they couldn't get it all, and it is a very aggressive type of tumor. So she's meeting with her oncology team today, coming up with a plan of treatment. And if everybody knows Sally, there's two things you need to know about her. One, she does everything. She's in every organization, whether it's local, in her community of Millersburg, Iowa County, the state of Iowa. And so a lot of people rely on her. So she's a very important person in a lot of people's lives. And so she doesn't do well when people are taking care of her, because it's always the other way around. And she's quite a fighter. So if somebody is going to be successful in fighting this, it's going to be somebody like Sally Hall. So I'll try to keep you updated as that goes on. But if there's anything anyone can do, it's really just thoughts and prayers for her and her family. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheriff. Our next meeting will be November 9th here at the West Des Moines City Hall. Is there any other business from the floor, from the board members? If not, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion is made and seconded. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carried.